Hello. Um, I've been putting this one off because I was hoping um, to have an interview already. Um, but at some point that becomes an excuse for me not doing this. So today was a good day um, to go ahead and make this recording. A bad day overall. Negotiations started about a month ago, November 11th with Brandy. They ended today, at least this set. I would say I have been negotiating with her as long as I've known her, with what feels like very little to show. My motto with her is always one step forward, two steps back. It's frustrating, it's painful, um, but we have a child together and it's necessary. My goal this time was to reestablish contact with her and to um, create a path back to normal. Um, I realized very quickly that was too much um, for a brief background because I assume everyone knows everything that's already in my head. Um, the number of times Brandy has ever said she is sorry to me is three. I have known her for well over a decade. Our child is 8 years old. Um, it is not my method. My method is to figure out what I did wrong, apologize, try to do something about it. Hers is I don't know. And that is a big problem years later. Um, I've tried to brute force learn everything I can think of with very little effect, or at least little effect that I see. It's hard enough to know other people's traumas, um, to truly know what they're thinking, and this often feels like I have to juggle a lot of impossible things all at once. And for whatever reason, it's always left to me, or I feel that it's always left to me. Because if it was up to her, um, she would one parent raise our child, and there's no need for me to exist. She likes money. Um, that's a motivator for her. Um, other than that, I don't know. I don't want to get sidetracked with that right now. But so that was the point of my negotiations. I realized it was too broad, so I took a couple days and I thought about what are the most important things that would have to happen um, for me to, pandemic aside, go out and get a job, get a place to live, um, and it all comes down to Brandy. She orchestrated and engineered this situation. Um, and even past that, past the pandemic, she is the mother of our child. Um, I can't give up on that. I can't run away. Um, I can't leave our child. And I have to continue to throw myself against this wall until I hope that I find a way through. I've been here since before the freeze. I can't tell you when that was. I'm sure if you Google Texas freeze, you'll find the date. Um, I've been here a long time. I've wasted a lot of money. Not waste. If everything goes well and the relationship is improved and our daughter is better off by having parents that can work together, that is not a waste. That is a very expensive investment and one that I am willing to pay. I will stay here until I absolutely run out of money. I can't pay for shelter. I will stay in my car. And when I can't pay for food, I will starve. But I will not give up on this idea. My parents failed me. There is no sugarcoating it. They were failures as parents. And that is not to say that they never tried, but they were incapable of it. Incapable of reaching compromise, incapable of working together. Um, all their motives were always selfish. Um, I want to get custody. Uh, I want to spend time with you. I want to buy this for you. Well, even if that was a lot rarer, but growing up, I had no respect for my parents as parental figures because they exhibited no maturity. My dad was abusive. Yes, he was married to a she bitch. Yes, she was abusive. She was had favorites with her own kids with my dad. Um, my mother, I would not be at that point so cruel to her, um, but um, she was left helpless. Um, in a world back then, it was harder for a single woman. Um, it's different now. So she had a lot of her own struggles. My dad got custody. They broke up when I was, or they divorced when I was 1 or 2, because my dad was abusive to her and the kids. And my dad got custody. And I don't know how that happens. I don't. To this day, I don't know the truth. My mom seems to think it was corruption with the lawyers or the judge. I don't know though. So yeah, they were absolute just failures. Um, and so very early on, of course, I was rebellious. When you think your parents are idiots, um, you don't have any respect for them. They don't make decisions for the best of you. They make decisions for the best of themselves. You rebel, and that's what I did. I was a terrible kid. Lots of anger issues, obviously. Um, but you begin to pay more attention then. What are your parents believing in? What causes them to be so mistrusting of each other, to want to harm each other, even at the expense of harming their children? Um, what drives them to these decisions? So I started to pay attention. And of course, without consciously realizing, I was developing my own framework for how I would be a parent, the beliefs I would have. Okay, well, I see that they do this wrong, so I'm going to do it this way. Or on the rare chance they did something right, um, that sticks out, obviously, too. So, come decades later, when I end up having a kid, I have all these ideas, all these plans. Just, I never anticipated that I would have a kid with someone who simply does not care if I exist, or would tolerate my existence if I never talked to her and just sent her money all the time. I personally don't know anyone who would agree to that situation ahead of time. Um, to say I feel cheated would be correct, but an understatement. I can't get these years back. I am unlikely to have another child. And now my child is almost halfway grown, and I have to consider that Brandy will never change, that I will not have the ability to pass down the very difficult lessons I learned to my daughter in a way where she doesn't have to suffer as I have. And in many ways, I believe her life will be harder than mine. Because I had at least two parents who could, even if they disagreed, arrange visitation calls. We didn't really have computers back then, so that wasn't a thing, um, that was the limits of technology. So they, the amount of effort that my parents put in is actually, well, not effort, but the amount of success, how I would grade parenting that my parents had actually far exceeds what Brandy and I have accomplished. So um, that's a real bummer. I, if there are other people who have had this situation, I would understand if they were swallowed by depression. That happens to me. It's incredibly difficult to find any upsides to what is happening. Occasionally, you can plan for something to bear fruit when your child reaches an adult age and hope that they are receptive to listening to you. And the problem with that is growing up, I got to see firsthand how easy it is for parents who lack ethics or empathy will manipulate and brainwash children to be nice to them and perhaps even go as far as to say the other parent is bad or an enemy. So I've seen that. It works, it's very effective against most kids. So you can get kids to believe anything. We do it with Santa Claus, religion. Um, Parents believed in genital mutilation. To convince people to commit horrors is not as difficult as one thinks. To convince children of them is a lot easier. Um, so there is that danger. I've already seen that played out. Um, the story that struck the most to me when I realized I had been too passive and allowed too many things to go on was um, I've always had the opinion and the belief that if a child is old enough to ask a question, they're old enough to get an answer. And I have treated our daughter this way. And so sometimes those are very difficult questions. They go against what her mother has taught her. Um, but I believe in that very much. I think it is selfish and insulting when a parent will knowingly lie to their child um, to make them feel better and make themselves feel better. I think that there is a better way to tell the truth and perhaps convey the meaning of something without lying. So our daughter one day had asked me, all children ask this eventually, is Santa real? And I said, not in the way that you might think. There are people who dress as Santa. He is a symbol. I don't know if there was ever anyone um, alive that that he's sort of based off of. But he's in cultures around the world. It's a symbol for Christmas, and what it tries to symbolize. Well, then she asked, well, I said no, and explained that a little bit, and then she was like, well, then who gives presents? I was like, well, your family, your mother, me, your brother, your grandmas. Um, and then of course she understands, well, if that's true, that means they've been lying to her. Um, and so I explained to her, I was like, this is something that parents do. Um, but what it really represents is this is a time where um, we like to give gifts to other people. We like to let other people know how much they mean by doing this. And this is a tradition, for whatever reason, that most parents do. Um, if you go to a mall or whatever, there is a real person, in a Santa Claus suit. Are they someone who lives at the North Pole, flies around with the magic reindeers, and delivers presents to every kid? No. Um, but that doesn't take away from the spirit or meaning of it. Um, and it's just a way to express love. If I think it's a little misguided, but um, that'll be for her to decide later on. So, of course, she turns around, straight up asks her mother on the phone. I can hear, um, is Santa Claus real? Because dad says no, and her mom says, well, yes. Well, just shit. Um, that's when I realized the system that exists as parenting between me and Brandy with our daughter is absolutely broken. Because at this point now, our daughter has to choose which parent is a literal liar. Um, so that is obviously wrong. Um, that is a horrible situation for a child to be in. That's a horrible situation for any parent with ethics to be in. And it's a situation that should never happen. Brandy is well aware of my belief that if asked a question, I will answer it truthfully. Um, and there are a lot of problems, and I waited too long. Anytime I ever went to Brandy with a problem, text by the way, I'm not allowed to talk to her or see her. Um, Very convenient that when you don't want to solve problems and you don't have to talk or see the person bringing the problems to you. So I began to look at the system, understand it, and try to think of better ways. Unfortunately, it all depends upon Brandy agreeing there is a problem, agreeing to fix it, and communicating that. So some of the big issues that existed before this, um, obviously getting a hold of anyone, no one would return my message. I used to have to call a house phone. We are in the 2010s, by the way, during this time frame. Used to have to call a house phone. No one would answer. No one would ever call me back. Sometimes daughter would answer, or sometimes Randy's mom would be polite enough to answer and say no one was there. Um, then obviously it's 2010s. They have nobody needs a house phone, man. They wanted to get rid of that, so now I'm forced to call Brandy's phone. That definitely no one ever answers. No one ever calls me back. So that creates obviously a big problem when you're trying to schedule visitation or time or calls. Um, and the last time I, before the last time I went to visit, it was over 1 month of me trying to schedule time with our daughter where no one would answer. No one would get back with me. Over a month after the freeze, it became simply impossible. And I went over there, and of course, after about 5 minutes, I was told to leave. Now, I've learned this lesson before. We'll talk about this story, but when someone tells you to leave their property, you leave. Especially, well, we won't go into that. So I left. I haven't been back. It's a lot of big issues, but there are even worse ones. Um, so during that time frame, my daughter and I came up with a solution that does not depend on Brandy's phone. Now, at this time, my daughter was 7. She was illiterate, by the way, so she could not read. She was barely able to start. I was reading at 4. One of the things my mother did correctly was read to me every night. I was able to read by 4. Um, so I hope a picture is starting to develop here. Um, Not that it is kind for me either. So she was also computer illiterate for the most part. They had a computer. About a year before this, I had offered to buy Brandy a computer so that our daughter would have one. And she refused because they already had one and they could share it. Her and her brother could share it. Her brother is a teenage boy. Let's just say my eyes were rolling at the time in disbelief, but okay. So, daughter and I come up with a plan. Uh, we set up, or I show her. Now, they already have Discord because he's a teenage boy. Everybody uses Discord. That's the thing. It's like Skype of the old days. Everyone uses it. Um, uh, so she has to get on using her brother's account. Her um, her brother has to not be playing a game or using it. Um, so of course I asked Brandy, hey, I tell our daughter, hey, make sure you ask your mom. So if you can have time tomorrow during this window, so it's fair, nobody gets upset. I want to use a computer. Everyone knows the window of time. Um, Brandy never responds, never answers to this request. So of course, all the time I'm hearing on the, hey, I want to use the computer now. I want to use the computer. It's so frustrating that these problems are allowed to exist. So our daughter is computer illiterate, and I have to explain to her step by step how to use these different programs to be able to contact me. She gets frustrated, of course, because she's a 7-year-old who can't read or barely use a computer. And on top of it, she just, it's frustrating. It's frustrating, right? Um, they won't help her. Literally, when she breaks down crying, someone might come over and here, let me do it for you. Here. Just outrageous to have to listen to. When I explain this problem to Brandy, nothing. Silence. No response. Now, I'm going to backtrack a little bit because this happens while she was on the computer and while she uses the phone. It was so common while our daughter was talking to me on the phone, even on the house phone or on Brandy's phone or on the computer, Brandy would just charge in, grab it, start yelling at me. I don't know how many times I've had to say, Brandy, this is my daughter and I's time. If you have something to talk to me about, I will always answer your call. Before this, I always answered her call. Did she answer mine? No. I don't want to say never, but we're talking 99.99% of the time. She never answered. Sure as hell call me pretty quick when she wants something. frustrating. Over a decade. I value patience, stoicism, control of emotion, believe in the best in people. Because if you treat people at their worst, they have no reason to do better. The amount of disrespect that Brandy has shown me over the lifetime of our daughter is impossible for me to calculate, to record. I just simply don't know if it exists anymore. How can you have a child with someone, show them no respect, watch your child struggle with just being able to communicate with their other parent, do nothing, or make it worse? The level of vitriol that you have to have speaks of very large problems on the inside. Problems that, as a person, I love Brandy. She is the mother of my child. And I have to show her that everything is okay. We can work together. We can make decisions together. We can improve all of our lives if we show respect and patience and understanding. And I have vowed to do this. Yes, it is frustrating sometimes. Yes, even I can get angry. But I remember my childhood. I remember the price that I pay for my parents' failure. My father is dead. There is nothing he can do to change, to make things better. The only saving grace that inspires me is that if I were successful where they failed, it is not a failure on them because it improved my life and my children's life, and I hope their children, and so forth. We are born in complete ignorance. The universe does not care. We have to struggle with every single thing. We have to learn every situation. What is better? What is worse? We hopefully pass those on. We hope to improve generation after generation. Those struggles are not failures. That is what I tell myself. That is why I fight so hard. And ultimately, that is why I make these recordings now, as a last resort, to hope that my daughter sees this, sees the failures of Brandy, mine, understands it, and is able to do better than we did. I cannot sit by and listen while my daughter and I are bullied by them. And it wasn't just Brandy, it was Noah, her brother, Brandy's mom, Kathy, literally snatched the phone or the headset to yell at me about something when they all have my number. It people are emotional. I have to remind myself that we all have different levels. We all have our weaknesses. Not everyone cares to be restrained. Not everyone considers the empathic effect that emotions can have on other people. It is incredibly disrespectful to me, to our daughter, for these things to happen. They simply cannot be allowed to continue. She deserves her own space. She deserves to have time with her father. And what I am asking for ultimately is the same respect that I give Brandy that she gives to me. That she treats parenting as a co parenting strategy, and that the way things were dysfunctional. They cannot continue. We have to reach compromises so that our daughter sees these examples, respects us enough to listen to us um, when we start to explain the dangers of the world, and chooses to learn from us rather than rebel. The stakes on this are literally the lives of other people. During the text, I will say there's some progress. Brandy responded more than normally. Normally, it's months between any response. Um, Brandy was more active this time, not necessarily daily, but um, you could get on that scale a lot closer. There were um, a lot of problems. Um, there was one time, I don't want to misquote, I don't have it with me, but um, one in the attempts to negotiate, I need to understand why Brandy is no longer allowing our daughter to talk to me over Discord. Um, if you look on this channel, you'll see my daughter and I would play games together. We would talk together. We would hang out online together. It's a great way, long distance, to do these things. Um, it really just some of the best moments of my life. Um, so, in an attempt to understand Brandy's point of view, I would ask her, "Hey, what's the problem here on your side? What can we do?" One of Brandy's responses was that while our daughter was talking to me or trying to set it up, um, she came across um, sexually explicit images of children on Discord. Now, that was not something that she has ever brought up before. Obviously, uh, I'm not a Puritan, but uh, I don't find that acceptable. And while I'm not the type of person who thinks the internet is the devil, any person who goes on a homepage and types in P will probably get auto-filled porn. Um, but then, appropriate levels of access for appropriate age is very reasonable. That's something Brandy and I could talk about and discuss. The problem with that is that the server that my daughter and I would hang out on, and the one I hang out on, happens to be administered by a friend of mine who our daughter was also very fond of hanging out with. So to accuse that person without proof, turns out when went and looked, there was nothing in the not suitable for work channel. I had told Brandy I had never seen anything like that, and so I have to have a conversation with an adult woman to remind her that it's not okay to accuse people of illegal activity. Um, but to ensure and make everyone feel better, I created a brand new Discord channel. It's brand new, nothing on it. It would be primarily just for my daughter and I to talk or play games. No, was the answer that I got. Okay, I sent Brandy a temporary code. Hey, come check it out. I asked her to, on her end, set it up so our daughter would have her own profile. Obviously, it's not appropriate for her to share profiles with a teenage boy who probably has different interests than her currently. And oh, I skipped over the one of the worst parts. Yeah, sorry. Again, I always assume everyone knows everything I know. Yeah, so one of the great side effects of our daughter sharing her brother's profile is that every day after our daughter was done talking to me, her brother would delete me as a contact. So every day, our illiterate and computer illiterate daughter would have to struggle all over again to set everything up again. They watched her do this day after day. When I brought this to Brandy's attention, nothing. How? Can you imagine her frustration? What does she think? I can't even. Can't. I cannot imagine the level of failure our daughter will consider us when she is just a little bit older and looks back with a more mature side of things. I can't imagine. My parents were awful, terrible people. Somehow, we're worse than them. I don't. It's easy to feel cursed, to feel helpless. It's easy. That doesn't do my daughter any good. Where was I? Yeah, Noah deleted us. That's obviously not acceptable. Not acceptable for Brandy to ignore it. That has to change. Um, she can't be dependent on Noah, on Brandy, on her grandma to talk to me. She can't be dependent on using their logins or their profiles. This is win-win for Brandy. I told her she gets all the passwords. She can create the passwords. She can spy and monitor to our heart's content, our daughter. It does, that's I can't stop her, but I go do it. Like heck, make join us on Discord sometime. I would love a real parenting session with our daughter. Um, these are all possibilities that exist. These are all things to make all of our lives better, and she chooses the option to make our lives all worse. It is an impossible thing to juggle. I believe there was progress this time. I do. I truly do. Brandy was more responsive. I haven't found what works, but that doesn't mean that the way does not exist. And the thing is, that's just the first problem. Because when I realized you can't throw in all these other problems, it gets too emotional. Well, this happened because this, and this happened because that. So I think the key to this one's success was breaking it down, try to focus on one problem, get an agreement, get a framework. If you solve one problem, both parents will gain respect for each other. They'll know that compromise is possible. They'll have a tangible result to go to our daughter and say, look, this was the problem. We talked about it. This is what we're going to do about it. Do you have any questions? We're here for you. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I want to make that happen. Um, I know it's possible. Doubt and despair are just everywhere. But I see this. I know it can be done. I'm starting to ramble. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff I forgot. I would prefer to be interviewed. It helps me focus when people ask me questions and I don't get sidetracked. And if I said we were going to talk about something later and I forgot it, I'm sorry. I'm starting late to record a whole life. I want to talk about the cool things. I've traveled a lot, seen a lot of things, learned a lot. I want to talk about those. It's kind of hard when you got these big problems that threaten your life and the future of your child. Anyway, I hope my point came out clear enough, and that's today's journal. See y'all later. Bye.